Hello, this is Aaron Ochola again. Uh, Today, this is I think our third episode. I want us to talk about this is a big thing, related to confronting ourselves, you know. And each of us has a darkness. You know, we have a darkness inside us. We have a shadow self. The reason I talk about this is it's heavily influenced by books by Carl Jung and Robert Greene. Robert Greene's Laws of Human Nature. In this book, it really inspired me. He says we all have a shadow self. You know, we all have a side of you that maybe one time when you're low or you lose your temper, you're like, I don't know what came over me, you know. I don't know what happened. I don't know what, you know. And as we've grown up, society has taught us to suppress this dark side, which might seem to be, and it kind of has worked because it brings order. You know, it helps someone be more behaved, but at what cost? So, what I want to do with this, how I want to connect it to thick mentality, is even if, for example, I'm a grown man, right? And because society is a certain way and it has made me behave in a certain way, and inadvertently made me suppress the shadow side, right? How do I make sure the effects of repressing that shadow side don't surprise attack me? You know, it's not easy, of course. It can be adversity. You have to confront this side. You also have to accept that it's not a bad thing. It is part of you. And you have to start to try to, work with it and change it into different things that can help you in different ways. I'll give you examples. As humans, one of the most basic and most common darkness we have is narcissism. Now, of course, you'll hear someone saying, if you say, oh, you're narcissistic. No, I'm not narcissistic. We really all kind of are narcissistic. Because even when you're choosing friends, when you're choosing people to be around you, you're going to choose people who somehow mirror you. They somehow behave like you. Why do you think that is? It's because we like looking at reflections of ourselves. Right. So narcissism in itself is not a bad thing. But of course, like with everything, there's a spectrum. Right? Narcissism, as the dark side of many people, can lead you to do many things. Not all of them bad. But it will only lead you to, if you recognize that, okay, this is, like I keep telling you, fire or electricity. You're like, this, if I let it go out of control, it's going to burn the whole house, and you say, let me do this in order to, let me maybe light a small fire, or maybe let me control it, put it in a stove, or let me put it in let's say a chamber, so that it doesn't burn the whole house. It's the same thing with narcissism. But to confront it is difficult because you need to admit to yourself. You're like, hey, hey, I'm narcissistic. And only when you start confronting that part, when you start saying, hey, I'm narcissistic, but how can I use it? How can I use it? And also, not the other thing is, another way to make sure narcissism doesn't overtake you is you have to stop saying only how can I use it for myself. Because like any form of energy, I believe narcissism can be turned into empathy. Actually, that's another thing from Robert Greene's book. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. They seem the opposite of each other, right? Narcissism being you thinking the world of yourself, and it seems to be self. But this is only because this is how the society has kind of portrayed it, and it has led us to view and use narcissism just for self. So if you get out of the mentality of just, hey, me, right? You can find a way to turn narcissism into empathy. This is how. Because, like we said, empathy is the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, right? So, that ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, it's literally, it's going to come from, it's going to be born of narcissism. This doesn't make sense now. But when you decide, for example, that someone else's story is more interesting than your story. Let's say if you're talking to someone, or if a friend is confiding in you, and you actually choose to really listen and say, this person is an interesting person, and there's a lot that I could learn. Kind of like when you go to see a movie, you're seeing these actors as interesting people, and you're letting what they're portraying kind of affect you, and that's how you enjoy the movie. It doesn't take anything from you. It actually entertains you. So if you approach people around you like that, this person is more interesting. I'm not that interesting. Let me listen. Then you'll be able to turn the me, I'm so great, I'm so this into that person is so great, or that person is this, that person is this. And inadvertently, you become empathetic. You'll be able to be like, okay, you know what, let me sit in their shoes from their point of view. But to do all that involves confronting yourself, telling yourself, Aaron, man, you are selfish. Aaron, you are full of yourself. How about now we're listening to, let's say, for example, John Bulliget. Anyway, yeah, so if you choose to see someone as more interesting than you, and you choose to listen to them with the same excitement like you used to go, let's say, watch a movie, Infinity War or Endgame, man, you'll find yourself just it just sort of happens, because you're not going to set out to be, today I'm going to be empathetic, today I'm going to, nah. it will happen when you decide to turn narcissism, because that the like of oneself too much, into, let's say, opposite narcissism. It doesn't make sense at that point. So opposite narcissism would be considering someone's story much more interesting than your story. And then when you do that, somehow, somewhere, you just become empathetic, because now you're like, oh, this person's story is more interesting. But that means also that story can be even more sad than yours. That means you'll stop feeling sorry for yourself. You'll find ways on how to help this person. So in that way, turning one of the biggest darknesses that we have into a light. Don't refute that darkness. It is in you. But turning it into a light. Now, one more thing. It's not easy. It's not easy. For me, believing in a higher power helps. It helps you know that you're not the biggest thing there is. You're a cog in a machine. And everyone, or some people, do have maybe higher powers, or some people don't, But in my case, it's believing something bigger than me. For me, it's God. Other people, it's nature. Other people, it's art. But you putting your ego through the adversity to believe, first of all, that you're not the biggest thing out there, but secondly, but to believe that, but also to believe that, let's say, someone else's story is more interesting than yours, you immediately turn it into empathy, And just like that, you have changed your story without having to condemn yourself for feeling a certain kind of way. But it started with confronting adversity, confronting your ego and telling it, hey, your story is not that interesting. The other person's is. So of course, there are other darknesses, greed, insecurity, and I think in some of the next episodes I'll talk about them and how you can transmute them. Remember, there's an episode where I talked about alchemy, transmuting something that is not valuable into gold. Same thing. You transmute narcissism or a darkness into something good. Thank you for your attention. Peace.